Hello and welcome to this special episode of Geoff Talk. Now, as you can see, things are looking a little bit different. I mean, where's Geoff? I'm Charlotte Jones, one of the Top Model TV presenters, and I'm excited to say that the tables are turning. Geoff has worked in the fashion industry for 20 years, but where did his journey begin? The Top Model family, well, we've been having a little bit of a natter and we've decided that we want to get to know the man behind Geoff Talk. So Rachel, Ivy and I, well, we've created a few questions, and in part two, Rachel is going to be chatting to Geoff all about Top Model and the Top Model Foundation. But I'm going to start things off by asking Geoff where his journey began and how he moved into the exciting world of fashion. So, Geoff Cox, welcome to Geoff Talk.
Thank you, Charlotte. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How are you feeling about it?
It's certainly an interesting turn of the tables, but you can't ever say I'm not up for a little bit of an adventure. So I've got no idea what's coming. So I hope I'm safe in your hands. I'm sure I am.
You are, but I'm very excited to get to know a little bit more about you. So as I've mentioned before, you have spent 20 years in the fashion industry. However, people might not know that you actually started your career in journalism and on breakfast TV. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I used to work for a cable TV network in the early days of cable, run by the late Robert Maxwell, who used to be a media mogul. And I started off literally as the tea boy. I used to wander around the studio and watch what they were doing, and very cheekily, as an 18-year-old, I once standing next to me. She's not very good. I'm sure I could do better than her. And he just happened to be the program controller. And he said, look, we've got a space for, it wasn't called an intern then, but for that kind of thing. So I literally started off making the tea, which was also a baptism of fire, because I didn't drink tea. So I got that right to start with. And then I started doing the cue cards, because there wasn't auto cue kept then. So it was what we used to call idiot boards. So basically a script written down literally. And then I got involved in doing some vox pops, which is outside broadcast. Vox pop stands for voice of a cross section of the population, and I used to do those. So they were like street interviews. And then one of the presenters got fired, and I did an audition piece, and they liked it. So I then worked on there for 2 years, and from there I made contacts in mainstream journalism and ended up working for a press agency in Clerkenwell in London, working on sport and politics, which you couldn't be more diverse. But as a young man in his early 20s, that was obviously an exciting time.
And how did you find your first experiences in front of the camera?
I was okay with it because I'd been DJing since I was 15, so I was kind of enjoying being in front of an audience. And obviously at first you make a lot of mistakes, and you have to work on your elocution because things get picked up really easily, as I am picking up on myself already today. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a real buzz, but it's not as easy as it looks. So I take my hat off to anybody that does make it look easy.
Well, what people also might not know is that before you moved into fashion, so you said you started with sport, but you also spent quite a lot of time in events. How did that happen?
Well, while I was doing journalism, and the DJing kind of went into that, is I used to run club nights and party nights and that kind of thing, and live music events. And I remember it very clearly because it was a new year, and I can't even remember what the job was. And I'd done an event for New Year, and I had to work New Year's Day. And I said to my boss at the press agency, I'm going to take a month off. Now, you have to understand that journalism was my dream job. That is, if anybody at school asked me what I wanted to do, it was journalism. So I took a month off because I was literally shattered, because I was doing events and doing the journalism, and never went back. Because I was making more money and working less hours and having late nights running events than I was doing journalism. I still obviously retain a lot of those skills, which are very useful in my work now. But literally overnight, just walked away from it.
And you do you feel like no looking back, any regrets, or are you happy with the way
No,
that you went forward?
no. I think even when you make mistakes, you can't look at them with regrets, because it's all feedback. It's all, life lessons. The only problem people have is if they constantly make the same mistakes. But I think you learn from your mistakes and you have to make them. But no, I walked away and didn't have any regrets at all, and don't to this day, because it was a great experience.
That's great. And obviously, again, so what made you go from that towards fashion? Because again, it's more diverse, there's more change. What drew you into the fashion world?
Well, again, I kind of fell into the fashion industry, to be honest, because I was working on events, and I'd also started doing sport events as a presenter, and I was working for Sky Sport, a football club, and I worked for Nationwide, the Football League, and Coca-Cola, and I was also working for sports events, and I was presenting at Speedway, which is featured on Sky Sports events, and I was approached to do the launch of the BMW 1 Series when it was first launched, the BMW car, and I think it was 2005, something like that. And I was asked if I'd ever done a fashion show, because I wanted to do a big fashion show for the launch of the car. I said, yeah, no problem, loads of fashion shows. I'd never done a fashion show in my life. Made lots of calls, made a few contacts. It went really well. And somebody was there from Swarovski, the jewelry company, and they asked me to get involved with some events they were doing, smaller events. And then I started working for a model agency called Impact, which no longer exists. And I was organising their castings and doing events for them. And it literally grew from there, that eventually I stopped doing the evening events and just focused on daytime events and fashion shows and castings and things like that.
What would you say are the biggest differences between working in the world of sport and everything like that to the worlds of fashion?
Without offending anyone, there are a lot of egos in both. So I think that way they're very similar, and they are very similar. To be honest with you, I've never been asked that. They are very similar, and the same as with politics. When I was covering politics, there is so much ego involved. But if people want to get on in those industries, they have to be confident, and that confidence can sometimes come across as ego, and sometimes people mishandle their ego, and they come across as being really egotistical. So the differences are much smaller than you probably think.
How have you got any tips to manage someone, as you said, if someone mishandles their ego and maybe gets a little bit carried away? Have you got any tips on how to handle someone that's their ego's getting in the way? When you're working,
If you're asking me now, in my current guise, I'd say don't work with them. When you're younger, you don't necessarily have the luxury of that. I've had award-winning models that have turned up 45 minutes late for their slot, and I've turned them around and said, we don't need you. And the shock on their face has been quite incredible.
yeah.
But, if everybody else can bother to turn up on time, then so can you. And I think you have to run a tight ship like that, so everybody knows that the discipline behind the scenes at any show is really important. As soon as you allow mavericks to take over or take control of the scheduling, you've got a big problem. But what was your question? Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Sorry.
Just obviously, you've got a lot of experience of, like, as you said, there's big egos in both the sports and the fashion industry.
Yes.
Your top tip.
Oh, you're handling egos. Yeah.
Best way to handle it.
I think you have to be very tactful when you placate people the best you can, but you have to be very sure in what you're doing, and you have to be confident in what you're doing without being arrogant. And I think you just need to guide people in the right direction and be able to compromise. I'm still learning and always learning. I work with students who work backstage on my shows through our education partnership initiative, and we work particularly with one college in Farnborough where the students are really talented, and they make suggestions of things because they're looking at it from a completely different perspective. And I sort of think, oh, that's not a bad idea. And I'll actually say to them, I really like that, I might use it. So I think you've always got to be open to learning, open to compromise, but you have to also draw the line where you can't let people just take over.
Great, well, that's good to know for future reference, so thank you very much.
That's okay.
Now, moving, if you don't mind, changing directions slightly and going a little bit more personal. In previous episodes of Geoff Talk, we've heard you mention your wife and your family. So tell us, how did you meet your wife?
We actually met on internet dating, to be honest. She loves me telling this story because I even told it in my wedding speech. I was actually the 5th date that weekend, and she'd been on 4 disastrous dates, and she was arriving to meet me. And she's even said to me now, she thought to herself, what am I doing? And we met up. I was 5 minutes late, which went down really well. And we just hit it off. And I was her only person that she went on a second date with of all the people she met. And here we are now, five years later. We got engaged a year later or 10 months later. In fact, that's a funny story. I'd taken her engagement ring all the way to Scotland and asked her father's permission, did it all properly, and they said yes. And everybody knew I had this ring except Helen. And I wanted to take her to Edinburgh Castle to propose to her. She flatly refused to go to Edinburgh Castle. I'd arranged a taxi and everything. She just would not go. She said, oh, I've been loads of times. So actually the ring ended up coming back home with us as well. And I eventually proposed 2 days later. The whole Edinburgh Castle thing didn't work out. But I actually proposed to her at the place where we had our first date.
Oh, well, I think that's really romantic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Now, you mentioned earlier about being a DJ, so I've just got one more question for you. When you were DJing at events, what was your favourite song, your favourite party song that you had to play every time you DJ'd?
Oh, crikey. That's a curveball. I don't know. There are so many great ones. It depended on the event. I'm going to cop out. It completely depended on the event, because what you have to understand, I was doing club nights as well as doing big social events, sometimes private events as well. So it totally varied. But I have my own personal favourites.
Go on, share that. Let us know.
Well, I really like Luther Vandross, Never Too Much. A certain age group always gets on the dance floor for that one. Some of the Michael Jackson classics, although it's not so kish to use Michael Jackson now, but some of his stuff from the late 70s was excellent. And as I said at the beginning of the interview about bad habits, I keep saying and I didn't used to do that. So that's a habit I need to. So Charlotte, please tell me off if I do that again.
No, I think it's been really lovely to talk to you. And thank you so much for being so open and sharing all of that with us. But don't go anywhere yet, because in part 2, my lovely colleague Rachel, she is going to be chatting to you all about Top Model, the Top Model Foundation, and you're not going to get away with it because she's got that little challenge for you too. So that will be coming up shortly. But thank you very much.
My pleasure.